The views and opinions expressed do not necessarily represent those of Access Fort Wayne, the Allen County Public Library, or any other supporting group. Access Fort Wayne is a department of the Allen County Public Library. If you or anyone you know might be interested in making a television show, please call 260-421-1250.
Hi, Dr. Cashman. Couldn't make it today, so the Grinch came instead. No. Happy holidays. I thought I'd bring a little humor to our show today. And it's starting to snow a little out there, and I guess there's going to be a storm the next couple of days. But this talk today is on memory, which is fascinating. Because other things, I'm always talking about prevention, but I tell you, memory loss can be largely prevented. Yeah, and that's the good news about this show today. I've got good news today. And the Grinch, incidentally, played pickleball a little earlier today also with this on, but with the mask off. So I wrote a book years ago because it interests me. I called it The Fraud of Alzheimer's Disease. Yeah, it's on Amazon, easy to read. It's on Amazon, very easy book to read here. And what I'm really saying in this book, that we are diagnosing people a lot of times. They miss a few words, and we say, you have Alzheimer's disease, and they live into the life of that. They accept that, quit their job. This happened to President Ronald Reagan, actually, and I'm not sure things would have worked out better, but it's part of the process of getting a day older that we miss a few words, okay? There's another great book here by Dale Bredesen, which I would like you to read. That covers it quite well. And I'll hold up some other books also. So let's start on this. I have a lot of information for you here, but the good news is that preventing it, the progression, I'll get you to understand in a minute what I mean by that, is you're missing a few words, and maybe it even gets worse. Don't throw in the towel and say, I have Alzheimer's disease, and that's your life from then on in, because they will treat you accordingly. And this is what I'm trying to say. Certainly there are some people who develop severe memory loss. They may have a genetic problem, and they've had bad health habits, and end stage, and they have to be institutionalized. That happens. But I'll show you that progression. But majority of the time, if you follow the habits, I would tell you, even if you are now missing a few words, misplacing your keys, things like that, that's normal, okay? And I will teach you how to keep a sharp memory. There are even tricks that you can do. And we will discuss those in detail. So let's prevent, you can even reverse mild cognitive decline. Your memory could be worsening, and I can teach you methods, things that you can learn. Let me give an example of myself, because I was always seeing so many patients as a neurologist, as a neurosurgeon, and I was worried about life and death and paralysis, things like that. When someone gave me their name, I did not pay attention to what they were saying. I did not look at them in a manner that I could retrieve the memory. So those are things, it's normal. That's actually is a normal thing, and I'll teach that to you. Okay. So what is memory by definition? That's to hear some information, to maybe repeat it, then you're much more likely to remember it. And then you have immediate memory, working memory, short-term memory, and then long-term memory. Let me tell you something interesting about long-term memory. Most things that happen to you that you speak about, you paid some attention, is stored in long-term memory. You can have a very poor short-term memory of what's going on, what's my next appointment, where's my suit hanging, where are my keys, where did I leave my car? You come out of a market, for example. That's short-term. That is what's most likely affected. The long-term facts, even someone having severe trouble, is stored in there somewhere. And it's like my mother, who lived till 95 years of age, who did not go to college. People with education, college education, their memory is good many years longer than a person who never went. That is well known. That is not because they were smarter, just more information was stored in there. But there came a time when she was 95, 96, she could not remember my name. I'm not sure she even recognized me. Facial recognition can leave you after a while too. But I asked her to repeat a poem from high school, and when she was a young child, she could recite poetry all day. Her long-term memory was fine. So long-term memories are stored in there. You just got to learn how to get them out of there, and we'll review that. So memory is hearing it through short-term memory that may last only a few hours. Maybe working memory, you can do something with it, and then you're part of the temporal lobe called the hippocampus will process it and send it on to long-term memory. You want to avoid getting the term you've all heard, Alzheimer's disease. I am not sure there even is such a disease. It's just the end stage of our memory problems. You don't want that, because when people have that, they may lose most of their memory, and it can go on for years sometime. So it's not that you have a heart attack and you die. Okay, you're gone. You're not suffering. But Alzheimer's disease, they suffer. It's one of the worst diseases that there is, because the person who has it will suffer with it, and that's what I'm going to try to prevent for you today. So, and it can be prevented. Many cases can be reversed, especially more in the beginning. And I will discuss with you the stages. There are 3 to 7 subtypes of Alzheimer's disease, dementia, memory loss. The first could be called subjective cognitive decline, SCI. Past age 40 or so is when you start to see this. I've experienced it myself, where I feel like, but you can develop tricks of always hanging your keys in the same place, and it can advance. It's so subjective, and that can last 20 years. Yeah, not get worse. If you practice some of the things which I would teach you, it probably won't get worse. The next step, remember I said there's 3 to 7 steps, I'll describe this to it, will be mild cognitive impairment. And you're a bit worse now, and you've got to have some habits. What drawer did I put this in? Where did I hang the towel? Where did I put the keys? Where did I park the car? Things that are a little bit worse. You back up the car, you got to pay attention. There can be a genetic component to it, and some people have the ApoE4 gene, and that's a familiar thing, okay? And if you have 2 of the genes, remember we have 2 genes more likely to get expressed, 50 to 90% that you will develop severe memory loss at a younger age. But there are things that you can do to prevent that gene from expressing itself. And that's what I will teach you. If you have no copies of the gene, the odds of any of us getting severe memory loss, Alzheimer's disease, you want to call it that, if we have none of the genes, is 9%. Almost 10% of the people have dementia down the line, but I'm teaching you how to prevent it shortly here. If you have one of the genes, the odds are around 20%, okay? And if you have a cholesterolase inhibitor, a cholesterol inhibitor in your body, because cholesterol is a great deal part of your brain, the incidence also increases. They have some medications out there now, Aricept and Amenda, made by Eli Lilly and Biogen, and they're pushing these drugs at you, and the doctors are pushing them. I know I'm a neurosurgeon, I was a neurosurgeon that neurologists in my group were constantly, everybody's getting it, but that only helps for a few weeks. So someone said these drugs are useless. Yeah, I think they're useless, but if you want somebody, yourself or somebody else, to take them for a few weeks, okay. And I noticed in the news recently, Eli Lilly again claimed they invented one and it was in front of the FDA, a new drug. And they had maybe 20 people in the Food and Drug Administration that reviewed it. Only one thought it might have some value. The other 19 thought it was nothing but hype. Yeah, I read it in the newspaper. So you see, I'm talking about, that's the reason the steps to prevent it are more important. And here's an interesting thing, and I want you to gather your own information here. I don't want you to stop statin drugs, cholesterol inhibitors, start them or stop them. No, what I want you to do is give the information to your doctor. You read it off the internet, read it off the books, and I'm going to hold it up too here. The Great Cholesterol Myth about statin drugs by Bowden and Sinatra. I was kind of looking through the book yesterday, and I was going to read to the head of one of his chapters, the statin scam. Yeah, right here. Read his book. Don't take my word. Read the book. Then even a book that is, would you believe it, this thick, statin toxic side effects, evidence from 500 scientific papers. Read it yourself. Read the summary. It's a big book, but just look at the summary will give you a good idea. I saw a patient recently. I see people, for them to get rid of their diabetes, I counsel them. And a pretty important person in town, actually, and he was taking statin drugs, and his kidneys and liver and all these tests were abnormal. And the liver was 3 times the normal value, they were very abnormal. He stopped the statin drug, and the tests returned to normal 1 month. So this is, your brain is made from cholesterol. Every cell in your body is made from cholesterol. The brain has tremendous amount of cholesterol in it. So to take a statin drug, which stops 6 pathways of metabolism. When you eat the food, it goes acetyl-CoA, and the statin will stop those pathways, and you can have severe dementia if you're on a statin drug. Mm-hmm. Yeah, industry's made billions, 35 billion, billions a year. I think up to 40, 50 billion now. And most of the people I talk to, 80% of the people I speak to are on a statin drug. They recommend it to avoid heart disease, when in reality, even raises the blood sugar level. It increases it. Read it. Don't take my word. Get other information and make up your own mind. But it's of great concern when your brain is very dependent on cholesterol, and they're giving you a drug to lower it in your body. So, and new medications are not going to solve this. That's the reason I want you to follow the things we'll be talking about, okay? And MCI, the second step in memory loss, can last 7 or 8 years, and if you don't do some of the things we speak about, it can get much worse, about 15 to 20%. After that, it gets rapidly worse. And so the memory loss is a progression, unless you had a head injury or something, but it doesn't happen overnight. So you can take steps, you can do things to avoid it. So in history, memory is very interesting because they had no way to write it down, no way to put it on an app or put it on in your computer. And they had to literally store, if you were going to give a speech or remember history going back, you had to store it in your brain. You had to train your memory. And ways that you can remember something a lot easier, things that I even use, because I'm, 39, 40, 47 time. So in the ancient world, they actually had memorized a system of memory. And I'm going to teach you about that. They had nothing handy, no way to take notes. They didn't write it down. There were no computers to store information. So many memory techniques were used, and they used it in poetry and songs. And they even invented something called a Roman room, where you would walk into the house, and whatever you heard or you wanted to remember, even if you wanted just to go grocery shopping, whatever, you would hang your memory in something in that house. It's a room that you memorized. You knew it like that. This would go for grocery shopping. It would go in a lamp. I want to go play some sport with my friend, and you wanted the date and the time. You would, as long as you associate it with something, you're more likely to remember it. That's the thing to learn. To hook the memory to something, to link it. The linking system was huge. So memory techniques were used a great deal. And so they even called them loci. Some people used their own home, and they want to remember something coming up, or they were going to go shopping, and now, we say Lexa, and we name the things, and Lexa knows. But in those days, they would take their own home and hang tomatoes on here, and vegetables and onions, and hang it there. And as long as they're associated with something, you're more likely to remember it. Simonides, Simonids, 500 BC, okay? He's the father of trained memory. Cicero had orators, and he had written it down. So how we applied memory system. And it was around 400, 500 BCs, the beginning of these systems were invented. Even Aristotle, and he hooked it to reasoning. He found reasoning related to memory. The Middle Ages, they hooked it to religion. Mm-hmm. A lot of the ministers memorized their sermons by linking it to something, and they would remember to give their short sermon. And priests use it, and they use it themselves. They didn't teach it in any school or anything. And and they would recite it, how to reach heaven, avoiding hell was a famous speech that they gave. And so memory training was something used commonly. We do not use it enough now, though, but after this is about the second or third time that I gave this talk on memory, and I even have a book here on memory techniques, which I'll hold up for using your perfect memory, Tony Buzan, and he records a lot of the history there. A very good book to read, and it teaches you the link system, all sorts of systems, the Roman room system, and gives you the history of memory in great detail. I mean, it's kind of fascinating. And they have found now, at Johns Hopkins, they found that the different parts of the brain where memory is stored. General memory things occupy the whole brain. That's why long-term memory may occupy the whole brain. Visual memory more likely to be stored in the occipital lobe. Emotional memory more likely to be in the hippocampus, which is the medial part of your temporal lobe. They did discover what's called the nucleus basalis of Maynard, and they found now that some people who have severe Alzheimer's disease, and they died from it, and they do not have the things normally found in people with Alzheimer's disease, but they found part of that brain missing. So there may be a part of the brain that's a very small area that the majority of memory could be stored, but actually it's stored all over the brain. Emotional things more likely in the frontal lobe, for example. They have found in Alzheimer's research that the brains of patients at autopsy have some deposits, amyloid deposits, which are between the brain cells, and they feel that they have something to do with severe memory loss. There's another one called neurofibrillary tangles, which are inside the cell, but they're now realizing maybe actually those are end products of the brain trying to repair itself, and they're not the primary cause of it. So the problem may be this nucleus we talked about, but the biggest thing that leads to memory loss really is sugar metabolism. The brain runs mainly on sugar, but not totally. 20 years ago, they discovered that other hormones and molecules can run the brain. And molecules made from fat, for example. And they run the brain extremely effectively. But they have found that diabetics, ones with high sugar, and then the brain cells get their energy from sugar, and then insulin has to degrade the sugar, and the IDE, that's a degrading hormone, but if you're diabetic, you're running as high sugar levels, and because you have insulin resistance, the insulin cannot get the sugar into the cell, so you use up all the IDE and you don't have enough of it. But the only trouble is the IDE, insulin degrading enzyme, also degrades amyloid as well neurofibrillary tangles, so it's not enough of it, and then people have severe memory loss. Is that the main cause of it? That could be 60% of severe memory loss is related to having elevated sugars, being a diabetic. But before diagnosis of diabetes is generally made, the insulin level is already elevated. The trouble is we don't check for it. Just like I'm pushing about checking for the GFR, glomerular filtration rate, to determine kidney disease in its first 3 stages when we don't test for it. We're not testing for insulin, and therefore a person can have memory loss, be on the path to severe memory loss, and have not enough IDE to degrade it. So that's part of memory loss, is problems with blood sugar. So and that causes inflammation, an inflammatory response. So the hippocampus is in the medial temporal lobe. That's when you hear some information, you have short-term memory, and then it goes to the hippocampus, which sends it on to long-term storage. So it looks like a seahorse. So new memory generally goes through the hippocampus. And the amygdala, which is also the temporal lobe, much smaller, right next to the hippocampus, is where a lot of your emotions are stored in there. And the nerves in there and the neurotransmitters in there affect the emotions. So the brain has about 100 billion brain cells, but they're interconnections. They have axons which deliver the message to the dendrites, but there's so many more dendrites. There's probably trillions of connections. Would you believe that? Yeah, how complex this 3-pound piece of fat is. Brain is mainly fat, actually, and a lot of it is cholesterol. But the majority of the time, the branches, the axons that deliver to the next neuron, which sticks out a dendrite, there's a space there called a synapse. And at that space, the enzymes that are in the nerve, they come up to where the synapse is, where the connection's going to be, and it does it in these little molecules, micromolecules. You can see them through an electron microscope, but you visibly can't see them. You can almost see them in what's called a Drosophila fly, which has only about very few cells, very few molecules, so they can, with a magnifying glass, can actually see these little vesicles. That is your memory. They have in them chemicals. Mm-hmm. They have in them chemicals, which then jump across the synapse and send the information on. And they now can demonstrate how you're thinking, for example, through PET scans invented by Antonio Damasio. And what they use is a radioactive tracer that's increased blood flow to a part of the brain that you is a visual thing you're talking about, or a memory thing. Memory is frankly all over the brain, although some of them concentrate more than others. But with the PET scan, you can be thinking about something, we can ask you something, and the PET scan will light up, and they can therefore find the part of the brain that is more likely to deal with something you hear, something that you see, or something that you're thinking about. So all these senses that we have play part of memory. Actually, smelling something has the most representation in the brain. Mm-hmm. So a combination of the senses, what we see, what we smell, what we hear, what we touch, they're all related to a part of the brain that might just light up. And so the cortex, that's the top of the brain, and to get more room in the brain, it has folds in it. That's so it can store a lot more information. And the cortex has most of the long-term memory. So we're hardwired for permanent memory, but we need to recall it. Remember what I said, older people have tremendous amount of information stored in their brain. The trouble is they get to hear the certain word, a certain reminder, and then it comes back. It could be visually seeing something where we're taking them on a trip, and they remember where it was. And a lot of this is hormonally determined. And in the past, Shakespeare used to have the Globe Theater, where he spent a lot of time on memory. A great book, too, by Harry Lorraine and Jerry Lucas is called The Memory Book. I encourage you to read that. And he is in there many memory methods, how to link something to another word or to another number. It's a system that you can indeed come up with. I encourage you, just pick one of them and become an expert at it. And they have found people that do that, actually, if that system, they're not allowed to use that system because they could be a genius in memory. Photographic memory, for example. They look at something, they get it memorized. You can't do that. You get to hook it to something. And it generally found out if they don't use their system they were trained in, they're like all the other people. So memory training is important. In like I said, the fraud of Alzheimer's disease, our memory is a lot better than we ourselves believe. I remember while I was writing some of these books, and a lady was walking through the door into our building to see one of the neurologists. And I said, well, I'd operated on her about a month ago, and I asked her, I said, what's going on? He said, oh, my husband is having memory tests done today. I said, what's the problem? He says, well, he was riding a tractor. What's he doing now? He does farming for my son. He's busy every day, and we go to dinner, we go to a movie. Was he really having a problem? He couldn't remember a couple of words, and neurologists want to do all kind of memory testing, probably hand him a few pills, maybe even a statin drug. You see my point? She was causing him to live into the role. Don't live into the role. Just a few people have to, but many of us do not. And so the things to remember is to improve your memory is association. It's like I said, I had trouble remembering people's names because I didn't listen to it in the first place. I didn't really look at them and try to associate them with some clothes they were wearing, or I didn't say, what'd you say name again? Or would you write it down for me? Or let me put it in my phone. You see, these, a good way, 90% of the people don't remember the name of a person the next time they see them. 90%. Mm-hmm. And you can become a memorized by learning to associate them with something. And actually, if you associate them with something ridiculous, yes, you're much more likely to remember it. Mm-hmm. You really distort the image, make it exaggerated, make it 6 rabbits sitting in your car when it rhymes, say, with their name. I think people remember my name a lot easier. I always rarely have anybody miss my name. I think they think of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and they visualize a reindeer. And it's being Christmas time, I guess that's understandable. A basic thing about memory rule: you can remember any new information if it's associated with something. You got it now? Associated with something that you already know or read or remember. You're much more likely to remember that person or the situation or the story that you're listening to. And it's like playing the piano, you know. I'm not great at it, but although I played as a kid at Carnegie Hall, I wasn't that good. It's part of music school. But to remember the notes, you know, E, G, D, and F, every good boy does fine, okay? And so associated with something. And So that kind of brings up the link system. We're linking it to something. Another way to do it is 10 unrelated items, a list you're looking at, but for each one, pick something ridiculous and then see how many you remember. A ridiculous picture with each thing you're trying to remember. And you can get in the habit of doing that, or develop your house a Roman rule, and so something out of proportion, exaggeration, something ridiculous. So something striking and novel. It will increase your memory. And get in the habit of doing it, and probably wouldn't take you but a few months. And that's why I think some people are playing cards, although it's a repetitive thing, like my mother's sister lived to 95. Perfect absolute memory. Was it her cards? I don't know. She did other things too. Her daughter took good care of her. And so I don't know. And but you can even use substitute words. Now remember, I talked about 3 to 7 stages of memory loss. Stage 1 lasts about 20 years. We occasionally miss something. I mean, don't tell people you get Alzheimer's disease. You're just a normal human being. Second stage, a mild decline, can last another 20 years, can do all your activities. And stage 3, mild cognitive impairment, when things have gotten a little worse. While I'm going through the stages, let me tell you something too. They have declarative and non-declarative memory. Non-declarative memory is playing tennis or pickleball, like I do with some sport or musical instrument. And that people seem to be able to continue many more years than declarative memory, which has to do about doing something, planning something for the future. So you have non-declarative memory and declarative memory. And people can play sports many more years in spite of not having. They may not, eventually may mess up the score a little bit, but that's about it. So let's continue on the stages. Stage 3, mild impairment, we talked about 1 to 3 years. Stage 4, moderate dementia, another 2 to 3 years. And you start having difficulty driving, anxious, aggressive, withdrawn, may have difficulty with finances. So stage 4, got to watch out. And 5 is severe dementia, 1 to 2 years, difficulty, finances, unable to drive, gets lost. At that point, you got to kick the car away. Then 6, worse, another 2 years. And stage 7, the final stage of dementia. Essence doesn't do anything, just laying there, needs a caregiver. So those can be the stages, but I think the first 2 or 3 stages, you could even reverse it. But stage 6 or 7, you can prevent it by a number of good activities, which we review. Number 1 is nutrition. Don't have diabetes. Diabetes, elevated blood sugar, and I already told you the science is much more likely to cause severe memory loss. And so in the MCI we talked about, is the information is processed in the hippocampus. And the hippocampus decides where to send the message, whether it's a visual memory, whether it's an emotional memory, whether it's a frontal lobe memory. So, like I said, my mother had unbelievable long-term memory. Poetry, I couldn't believe it. Anybody, because they didn't have TV then in those years, and the amount of poetry that she memorized. And I think poetry was a big thing that they used in schools in those years. It was a residual for building a good memory from years back. So, but the MCI can be reversed 80-90% of the time. Nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, eating a proper diet, getting the nutrients. The other types of dementia, which are rare, okay? and they have to be treated differently. Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's disease. Many of people with Parkinson's disease, the shaking, the stiffness, many of them have memory loss. But I saw a patient with it recently, and I kind of thought it was due to a statin drug. Remember I told you statins interfere with the mevalonic pathway, that food digested to acetyl-CoA, and then there's a mevalonic pathway, and statin drugs stop 6 pathways. 6. It's brutal effects. But again, don't stop them, start them, read, gather information. I bet your doctor never read any of those books. I even had a cardiologist walk up to me about a month ago and said, statins are God's gift to doctors and patients. And he himself was stumbling while he's walking. And I had the guts to ask him if he's on a statin, and he was. And I wanted him to get the books to read. He said, I can't read, can't see right. Is that all due to the statin drug? Makes you wonder, okay? And those are not the only books I got on statins. I got about 5 others at home. I got 2,000 books in my basement. So when I'm speaking, it's not just me. It's based on 2,000 books in my basement. I read a book every 3 days, incidentally. And I think one of the things, if you're on the road to memory loss, to do some assessment, some of us can't take it. We don't want to know. You get severe memory loss, when in reality, maybe it's not something that we concentrated on, but there's other things going in my life. But you see the severe memory loss much more past age 85, and maybe 32%, less than 65, 1 in 100. Well, what can you do? Modifiable risk, nutrition. What are you eating? Are you eating processed food, a high sugar diet? How much mental activity is going on in your life? I feel so lucky at age 39 that I do all these TV shows, radio shows, give lectures, YouTube, etc. I feel so lucky. And I had my blood test done recently too, at any test lab there on DuPont, and every test was normal. Am I just a naturally healthy person? No, I have good habits. I do what I teach. My dad had a deli in New York. I know what bad food is, and my family ate it, and I ate it. But I know better, and I changed, okay? So other things important, mental activity, I mentioned that. Social activity, do you have friends that live in, are you going to a church or a synagogue or whatever religion you have? Are you meeting the people, talking to them? Are you calling them by their name? There you could practice it. So, and other thing I ask people is the history of any of their modifiable diseases. Get rid of your diabetes, and if you do, you will probably get rid of about 50 different diseases you might have. Kidney disease, vascular disease, strokes. Other ones too, get rid of cigarettes. They're highly related to memory problems. Alcohol is a big one. I was a neurosurgeon, so I treated other complications of drinking too much. You read that 1 drink of alcohol destroys 1,000 brain cells, but I read other books and find that's really not true. But I don't recommend people drink any alcohol. I treated patients where 1/3 of the brain was missing, and all they had was memory problems. Half the brain was just sunken down, was just full of fluid collection. The brain was gone, but they were still functioning except for memory. They were unsteady. So there are many different plans on how to avoid this progression. I'll hold up some other books too, but here's one called the Neuro Plan, 5 key lifestyle changes: nutrition, exercise, unwind, de-stress, restore. Sleep is extremely important because during sleep, your brain is repairing itself. It's getting rid of bad cells, especially REM sleep, real deep sleep. and we go through cycles. Every 90 minutes, our brain is recycled. Yes. So this thing is not inactive. We not be aware of anything, but there's a lot of repair work going on. So sleep is important. The brain, is only 2% of your body weight, but it takes up 20% of our energy. Are we surprised? It's working while we're sleeping. And so how to give yourself severe memory loss? Diabetes, insulin resistance. Remember, you were not going to have enough IDE, which can degrade the insulin, that you're lacking the nutrients, B6, B12, that you're on statin drugs, that you lack exercise, because this is good for you, cigarettes and alcohol. Incidentally, which you may not know, but there is sugar in cigarettes. Not many people know that, but I knew it before Gary Taubes wrote a whole chapter in his book. You might read his book, and if you want to read more about it. Yeah, they did it because it would make cigarettes more addictive, and that was done way back in 1920 when they take the tobacco leaves, they cut them in the field, they soak them in molasses to increase the sugar content to 40%. And then you smoke it. Now the same thing going on. They're trying to addict kids to cigarettes, and the same thing to them. Yeah, the child's brain is not fully developed till age 25 at least, and there's a tremendous amount of stuff going on in a child's brain. Children by age 3 or so have forgotten most of what went on in their life before that. They've studied that scientifically. And then the brain builds itself at age 25. But if they smoke marijuana, cigarettes, for example, that generally puts them one grade behind what they would have been. And also they get pot bellies, which means they get diabetes. So smoking marijuana is not good for anybody, no less a child. And they've got children have a 20% rate of smoking marijuana. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So the main threat to memory loss is inflammation, lack of nutrients, and stress in allowing gene expression by not eating correctly, okay? So brain cells are connected to your health. Dementia, progressive dementia, if you want to call it ALZ at the end, is highly related to general health, okay? And that's because of inflammation of the brain. Sugar-damaged proteins cause inflammation, okay? And the body reacts to invading pathogens. For example, if you're eating a lot of sugar, the bacteria invade and you develop most dental disease. Most dental disease is related to eating sugar. Of course, dentists aren't out there screaming at us, stop eating all that sugar. Yeah. It's true. And I've been through it too. I didn't know that. I had problems with my teeth almost into college years because my parents didn't tell me to brush my teeth every day. I now brush them 3 times a day and use mouthwash to boot. And this is much better. Every child, it should be taught in the schools. It should be taught by the dentist. It should be taught by the parents. But if you use the schools, for example, that would be very helpful because supposedly every child goes to school. And the body responds to invading pathogens too by making amyloid. So is that the cause of all this memory loss? So it's a combination of diabetes of the brain. As a matter of fact, they now call type 3 diabetes. Memory loss. But we can handle only about 15 grams of sugar a day. But how much are we eating? Much more than that. But otherwise, the body hooks it to proteins and causes havoc through the whole body, not just the brain. So So what really causes dementia? We can prevent 2/3 of all dementia. Isn't that a wonderful opportunity? Prevention is the cure. That's the name of my show. Just like we should get a GFR test to make sure that your kidneys are okay. Okay, we don't get the symptoms till 4th or 5th stage of kidney disease. The 5 stages of kidney disease. My last show was on that, incidentally. If you want to see more about it, you'll find it on YouTube within a week or so. And sugar causes insulin resistance. We talked about that. Sugar causes cardiovascular disease, nutrient deficiencies, toxins, because they hook to proteins which deposit all over your body, inflammation, depression, anxiety, genetics. So let's talk about 7 myths that we think that memory is decreased only as you get older. Well, that's wrong. A lot of it is by our nutrition, lack of exercise, stress, eating the wrong food. That aluminum causes it. The flu shots cause it. Our flu shots don't cause memory loss. They throw that out there so that you'll get sick, and they can work on you and you can send you a bill. And that brain cells can't be repaired. That's incorrect. If you do fasting, like what I teach people, is to eat 65% or so good fats, okay? 20% protein, 15% vegetables, and fruit, and to do fasting. In other words, 16-8, I don't eat till around noon. You can eat in an 8-hour schedule. I find I weigh 135 pounds, okay? Am I bragging about it? Yeah, I'm bragging about it. And it doesn't almost matter at times what I eat, although I'm 80% careful, because if you keep it in that 16-8 period, your body has a chance to get rid of the bad cells called autophagia. It can get rid of the bad cells, repair cells, build new cells. Our brain builds new cells every day. It's called neuroplasticity. The trick that you got to follow is that you get more neuroplasticity than cell breakdown. So an autophagia gives your brain and your body its time to repair itself and for you to be healthy. I really think this 16-8, fasting is in history. 5 days, you eat 2, fasting, some Ramadan, and maybe eat only at night, or different religions, but it all has some value. But what I am saying, the easiest is like 16-8 is what I practice. And I really think it should be pushed more. In ancient times, we only ate 2 meals a day. Now we're eating 3, then we eat this processed food, no wonder we're sick, okay? Some memory loss generally will not kill you, and you will suffer. So you don't want that, okay? You want to follow these things. In our brain makes BDNF, neurotrophic factors, which are brought on by exercise, and this you can produce more neurotransmitters, good ones, and your brain volume increases, BDNF. Avoid toxins and plaques, amyloid, neurofibrillary tangles. We still don't know, are they a byproduct of the brain repairing itself, or are they the primary cause of interference with nerve conductions? It does not appear to be the case, but you need to be aware of them. And so our memory, remember, said, is located in these little vesicles that are inside your axons, and they get to the synapse, and they send the message to the next nerve. And we have trillions of connections through our body. And that's what makes a good memory. Another way to improve memory, which I'm quite familiar with, being a pickleball and a tennis player. And I met a gentleman from New York one time, and I saw him in Naples, Florida, and he had a target set up on his tennis court. I used to play. I was obsessed with the tennis. Now it's pickleball, and he was aiming at this sandbag in a certain part of the court, and he must have spent 2 hours aiming for the same spot. The pro that was giving the lesson, who was giving me a lesson next, told me about this guy. I gave him the guy's name because I read about him in a book. So if you want to improve on something, repeat it. It's called the Ebbinghaus effect. Repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. I do that. A certain shot I want to get better at. I even did it today when I was at Wildwood Racket Club, and we take turns playing, but there was one court open where two of us didn't have four, so we played against each other, and we were teaching each other how to hit a certain type of serves, and we repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, and we get better. That's called the Ebbinghaus effect. And so we have short-term immediate memory, then it goes to short-term, then a working memory in the hippocampus area, and then it goes to long-term memory. And remember, your immediate memory may be poor, but there's a lot of stuff stored up there. And we really spoke about the 7 steps on the road to dementia, from mild to, and I think we should stop calling it disease. And maybe, I wrote this book after reading Dr. Whitehouse' book from the Cleveland Clinic years ago. We're talking about 15 years ago. And I was looking at it today. I hadn't looked at it in a while. The fraud of Alzheimer's disease. I mean, the fraud. Well, they tell you that. And certainly a few people, maybe it is a severe genetic thing, but there are certain towns in South America where, but they're not doing anything about it either. They all go on to have it, but do they practice prevention? I doubt it. A lot of people in South America are diabetic. Over 90% of the people in South America have diabetes. Mm-hmm. I know, I've been there, and I read it out in the paper. It's so severe that they even are going to tax certain foods, and so people won't buy them, okay? Now, you can do something called cognoscopy to see what's the situation, or you can just follow the good habits instead of getting the results of these tests. And what other blood tests could you get? Homocysteine, you want it less than 7. Remember the serum insulin, your vitamin B6, B12, folate, vitamin C, D, and E, the omega-6, that's the bad fat, and the omega-3, the good fat. But remember, the brain is made out of fat. Your fasting insulin, your HbA1c, but serum insulin catches you on the road to diabetes many years ahead of time. And another way of improving your brain is called RECODE, good memory. That again is in some of these books. I'll hope another book, The Better Brain Solutions, Stephen Masley. I encourage you to read that book too. It's excellent. The more information you get, you're more likely to do, the things that I spoke about. And so I think, in summary, what I'm saying is prevention is the critical thing here. Do everything that you can to prevent it by eating right, by exercising, by de-stressing, by getting something to do, just socialize, meet people, join a religious organization so that you are meeting people so that you are a positive thinker. Could Alzheimer's disease just be a fraud that is just progressive memory loss because you are not rebuilding your neurotransmitters? Yeah, I think it's probable. If someone's missing a few words in your family, don't tell your spouse. You have Alzheimer's disease. They may start living in the role when in reality, they're just missing a few words. Respond to their actions. And sometimes they just may be depressed, or maybe they're smoking too much, or maybe they're drinking too much. So get on the road to positive thinking. Get rid of diabetes, causes 50 diseases. 90% of the people in certain racial groups have diabetes. But what do you think they're going to have? They are going to have dementia. They're going to have memory loss. They're going to have kidney disease. They're going to get their legs amputated. 50% going to grab their chest and be dead at a young age. 50% of people out of heart disease just grab their chest and they're dead. So they need to act on their blood work. You are what your blood work is. No, you are what you're eating. That determines your blood work. Yeah. But thanks for listening to the show. You can go to YouTube and see a lot of my other shows, a tremendous amount of information in there. Rudy Cashman, Mind, Body, and Spirit will lead you to. You'd have to go for a half hour, look at all the previous shows. And we have to thank the public library for allowing us to do this, that you can speak about what you believe in, about is truthful. You can take me up on about what I say, but there's 2,000 books in my basement. You better be prepared. I may not be that smart, but I sure have read a heck of a lot, and I love the people. I'm a doctor. That's why I'm doing this. No other reason. I don't get paid for doing this, and I do it because I want you to be healthy, and I want you to live to be 100 with a good memory, no disease. But are you going to beat me? I don't know. I practice all the time. I already played today, and I maybe play a couple of days from now if it doesn't snow too much. I do this because I love you. Thanks for watching this show. Maybe read some of these books. And my other show is on heart disease, kidney disease. Now, memory, maybe the next one will be on GI disease. And each one is labeled, Prevention is a Cure. I want you to prevent these things. Otherwise, industry will surround you, take your money, and you still got the disease. And they'll just treat whatever comes up, but they will not go at the root and get rid of the problem, what I'm doing today.